I've been in the bathtub for 5 hours, but the phantom smell still haunts me. At first, I tried to wash it away under a powerful, hot shower, ignoring the minor burns on my skin. Then, convinced I was clean, I emptied an entire bottle of shower gel left by the previous tenant, some kind of rose, floral, and caramel-scented foam, according to the label. I couldn't smell it. I was planning to make a doctor's appointment. After what happened, I knew I needed professional help, and probably a stiff drink. But before heading out, I glanced out the window. Dark, layered, black and white clouds were crawling toward the earth. I immediately re-evaluated my priorities. The moment I connected to the internet, my ICQ messenger blinked with a new notification. Can't get through to you. You probably forgot to charge your phone. So, buddy, when are you coming over for the harvest? It was Sari, a childhood friend. He had recently gotten married and, dreaming of a big family, sold his city apartment and moved to the country. Sorry, Sari, I have to pass for now, I typed, my fingers trembling. After a moment's thought, I added, the stuff you guys already moved can just stay there for a while. You're ruining our plans, buddy, he replied, followed by a sad emoji. Allergies, I lied. The doctors are admitting me to the hospital while everything's in bloom. Okay, pal. Get well soon. After thanking him, I switched to invisible mode, deleted all my contact information from my profile, and then wiped the whole account. Now I could make that doctor's appointment. After that, I went to the railroad website. At this point, I think some backstory is unavoidable. As I mentioned, Sari had recently built himself a big place out in the country. That weekend, a huge group of us went out for his housewarming party, starting Friday evening. Just a couple of hours from the city, and you're at a 2-story house with a veranda, a traditional banya, a barbecue gazebo, and what we jokingly called our own private dining hall. We completely forgot about healthy eating until Monday. With no neighbors yet, the development seemed either brand new or already abandoned. Despite being well kept, we could be as loud as we wanted. We blasted music from the car, the beer flowed like a river, and our newlywed friends were beaming. His wife, either from overeating or because Sari had already been busy, had a small bump showing under her t-shirt. The view was incredible. A river, and behind it, a forest that served as a natural, protective wall. In front, a silvery sliver of water. It was sunny, birds were singing, and in the morning, as the sun rose, you could hear the distinct calls of night birds. It was a wonderful place, so it was strange that it was completely empty. The night from Friday to Saturday flew by. At first glance, everything was peaceful and quiet on the second floor where we were staying. We were in the guest room, but I felt uneasy sitting across from the window. I even made a mental note to bring some curtains next weekend. The existing one was a faded relic from the Soviet era that had lost more than one battle with moths. The night peeked in at our party through holes of various sizes. The curtains also didn't close all the way, leaving a gap that sent a chill down my spine, right to the bone. Looking into that sliver of impenetrable darkness felt like an icy hand was reaching between my lungs, its fingers climbing up to squeeze my trachea. It got to me so much that when I went out to relieve myself, I thought I heard voices coming from the forest. I tried to peer into the darkness, but it was so thick that even the moonlight didn't help. Maybe someone else had arrived while we were inside playing Twister. Dude, don't be so creepy, Sari grumbled, refilling my glass. I refused. I didn't want to venture out into the night again, especially not to that horrible structure. Everything about the property was modern and normal except for the damned outhouse. The stone path leading to it felt like a genuine trial. Maybe they ran out of money, or maybe tradition was just too strong, but that 4-sided building became the butt of many jokes. True to form, it was just a hole in the floor, a classic village outhouse like our grandmothers had. I don't know about you, but those holes have always terrified me. You're sitting there, and suddenly a hand shoots out and grabs you. Or you stand up, glance down, and see a pale face like something from a Japanese horror movie, its eyes bulging. The door won't open, and it drags you down into the pit. The floorboards creaked, and I personally saw that the nails were loose. It was a good thing no one had kids. A child could easily dislodge a board and end up with a tombstone for their trouble. It's not mine, Sergei defended himself. The old owners left it. I wanted to save money for the housewarming feast. I'll rebuild the toilet with my next paycheck. That's how the first night passed. On the second night, the whispering grew louder. If only one of them had believed me, had stopped brushing it off as just the sound of the rain, maybe things would have turned out differently. Or maybe not. I don't know anything anymore. I just want to wake up and for this smell to be gone. It started pouring, coming down in buckets, right when we were getting ready to watch the sunset. We'd already brought the camera out to take some beautiful pictures. Just as the sun was dipping toward the horizon, low, black and white clouds rolled in from the forest and burst open. The rain hammered on the roof and rattled against the windows, the drops shattering and beating down the leaves. The short walk from the gazebo to the house left us soaked to the bone. We huddled by the warmth of the fireplace while something watched us from the gap in the curtains. This time, I kept my thoughts to myself. I just sat further away. We played cards, and I kept glancing up from my hand. Several times, I was sure I saw something moving out there, behind the window. As Sari would say, only a complete madman would go out to take a leak in that kind of weather. Well, call me a madman, but I don't regret my choice for a second. The alternative, using a bucket in the hallway, felt a little too much like my days in the junior troop at summer camp, with scary stories told under a rust-red moon while the old swing sets creaked on their own. Strange thoughts, I know, but they pushed me out the door. The rain was coming down in sheets. I just stood there, staring into the impenetrable blackness. It was so dark that if it weren't for the roar of the downpour, you might think you were in total isolation. That's when I tensed up. I couldn't hear any other sounds of nature. A chill ran down my spine, but it wasn't from the cold raindrops under my soaked clothes. It was a different, specific kind of cold. Before making a final dash for the outhouse, I peeked through a narrow slat in the window, scanning the bright strip of life inside the house. I made it to the outhouse, lighting the way with the screen of my waterproof phone. The screen wasn't very bright, and I was so used to it that I didn't even bother turning on a light beforehand. So there I was, sitting in the dark, doing my business, when I heard it again, a whisper. It wasn't the rain, it was a real, sibilant whisper. It was easier to hear without the music. This time, I could make out fragments that sounded like words, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. I tensed up, straining to listen. I listened so hard that I heard something else, a rustling in the wet grass. And it wasn't just one something. You know that feeling when you can sense movement nearby, a feeling on your skin? It was like that. I lit up the door with my phone screen and nearly crapped myself, though I'd already taken care of that. I immediately turned the screen off. Who locks themselves in a village outhouse in the middle of the night? I didn't. That flimsy metal latch is now branded into my memory like a red-hot iron, pulsing with my heartbeat. I forgot how to breathe. I stared into the darkness, afraid of some wild animal that might have wandered out of the woods, scratched at the door, and found a ready-made snack in a can. It wasn't a pleasant feeling, to say the least. I stood up and reached for the latch, but just then, something slammed into the small building from behind. There was a dull thud, and someone, or something, let out a noisy, guttural sound, like a death rattle. I froze where I stood. It was still out there, listening, sniffing, chomping in the mud. We remained like that, testing each other's patience, until the splashing sound started again. My brain screamed at me to move. What happened next is embarrassing, but I have to share it, just in case you ever find yourself in a similar situation. They say your mind works differently in extreme situations. I managed to work the loose nails out of the wall and pocketed them, just in case. Diving under the floorboards was one thing. The smell of a cesspit when you're above the hole is bad enough, but finding yourself in the thick of it is another. The dense, viscous stench was sobering. In that moment, all I could think was how much of an idiot I would look like to my friends. I was about to climb back out when something slammed into the structure again, this time against the door. All my courage deflated like an untied balloon and sank straight to the bottom of the pit. I followed its example. Holding my breath, I crouched down. That's when the realization that there was way too much crap piled up in there hit me over the head. Left by the old tenants, Sari's words flashed through my mind, which made me wonder how many other empty houses were around. It was strange. If wild animals were roaming the area, it would have been in the news. Something pounded on the door again. Then, it flew open with the speed of a special forces soldier on a mission. I ducked deeper into my foul, soft refuge. I managed to hear sounds that I am certain will haunt me for the rest of my life. I held my breath again. A hoarse breath, laced with a low howl. I pictured a scorching hot snout entering the soft, hellish space, its breath filling the small enclosure. Whatever it was, it had now stuck its head into the doorway and was breathing greedily, trying to pick up my scent. I can't guarantee that's what happened, but it's the image my imagination supplied. I stayed like that until the door closed. I resurfaced, afraid to breathe. It was disgusting. I wanted to vomit up my own insides as the cold filth filled every opening on my face. The air itself was thick and tasted vile, but I barely paid attention. For a second, I thought I might have imagined it all, that I'd hit my head. But then, in a classic horror movie tradition, a scream ripped through the night. The screams of my friends, from the house. They screamed with horrifying shrieks that tore at their vocal cords. It was terrifying, but it got worse when the screams began to fade. The crashing sounds from the house mingled with other, deeply unsettling noises. Maybe my imagination created them, but I swear I could hear the crunch of human bones. This went on for several hours. And the entire time, I sat in that cesspit, hugging my knees, shaking with silent sobs. The thing that had looked into the outhouse had come with death. I was incredibly lucky it hadn't smelled me, because the stench in there was unimaginable. In the time I sat there, my nerves managed to settle. Of course, settled is hardly the word for what I was going through, but the ability to think clearly returned, and with it, my old fears about village outhouses. I pressed myself into the farthest corner, trying not to make a splash, trying not to open my eyes. The feeling that something incomprehensible and terrifying was sitting right across from me wrapped its cold, bony arms around me, tickling my chest. But what scared me even more was the thought that the thing would come back and, this time, think to stick its head down the hole. I don't know how I didn't lose my mind before morning. Actually, I'm not sure if I'm still thinking clearly now. As I type this, I reread every line several times, searching for logical inconsistencies, for the slightest hint that I went insane. That would make things so much simpler. But, to continue, at some point, I felt it. Everything around me just became different. My consciousness felt like it was released from captivity. You know, the birds started singing. I realized the rain that had isolated us from the rest of the world was gone. The sky was no longer black and white. Sunbeams were actually breaking through the cracks. I could see them through the hole above my head. But I didn't want to leave the little structure. I wrapped myself in the illusion of safety like a blanket, the same way you do when you feel the possibility of monsters under the bed. Except these monsters had already come and gone. After a few minutes of deliberation, a choice that felt life or death, I finally climbed out. For a moment, I was the scariest thing for miles around. Everything looked so cheerful and ordinary that if I had heard my own story from someone else, I would have never believed it. As I walked toward the house, I couldn't help but notice the disgusting squelching sound I was making. A lot of filth had caked onto me. I looked back and realized my footprints from the night before were gone from the stone path. Even if they had been there, the rain had washed them all away. The rain helped me hide, and the unlocked door played to my advantage. I hadn't given them any reason to think someone was in the outhouse. But now, in the gentle morning sunlight, the whole nightmare felt like a bout of delirium. I felt embarrassed and started concocting a story about how I'd fallen into the outhouse and passed out until morning. That's when I noticed the silence. Outside the house, everything was normal, but from within, there was nothing. Not a sound. And that was strange because there was no one inside. I checked every inch, every closet, every possible hiding place. Things were in their proper places as if the house had been staged for a sale. It was as if the people who had been vacationing here had simply evacuated during a fire drill, leaving everything behind. Was I scared? I don't remember. I just thought I had to get out of there before it started raining again. In the distance, over the forest, it was already starting to drizzle. I don't know if the rain had anything to do with what happened, but I had no desire to get caught in another downpour. So I ran to the river. Just as I was, fully clothed, I jumped in. It took a long time to wash off. The smell was pervasive. It seemed like everything reeked of it. I still can't get it out. It's probably just psychosis at this point. I even caught a cold from splashing around in there, but I had to get myself cleaned up if I hoped to get out of there on the train. Otherwise, they'd mistake me for a homeless person. I didn't have any money, either. It was a miracle my phone survived. It really lived up to the advertisements. I showed it to the conductor as my ticket, but not before throwing my SIM card out the window. I spun a tale about getting lost in the woods with friends, about wandering through swamps for days. I'm not sure there even are any swamps around there, but the truth didn't seem to matter. She even gave me a cup of hot tea. Getting around the city was harder. You won't believe it, but the local homeless guys thought I was one of them and scraped together enough change for my bus fare. The moment I got home, I jumped into the bath. Then Sari texted me. And that's where this story began. You can call me superstitious, but I must have crossed myself 20 times, thanking God I had left my ID at home since I had taken the train. Just in case, after canceling the doctor's appointment, I went online. When you're in a hurry to sell an apartment in a big city, realtors jump on low prices. The deposit is already on my card. Tomorrow, I'll hand over the keys and head to the train station. I know it's incredibly stupid. Maybe it was just the delirium that paid me a visit in the outhouse. But I'm sure of one thing. Besides my ad, another one will be posted today, for the sale of that very plot of land, with pictures taken right in the rain. I looked closely. The footprints are washed away again. So the phantom outhouse visitor has an alibi. You see, I don't believe that Sari suddenly decided to sell the house. I know it wasn't him who texted me from that account. So I don't feel any guilt for my hasty escape, not even a prick of conscience. I don't know what happened there, but I'm afraid it's going to affect everyone on his contact list. I'm glad many of them are on the city forum. I'm begging you, please think twice before you go out to a village, a settlement, or anything like that. Even if this was all a coincidence or just the ramblings of a drunk man, I don't want you to risk your lives. And remember, wooden outhouses are excellent at masking scents.